we hack the code and flip the tag. Where cliches come to retire. Drop that beat, turn down to fire. Say what's real, make fears take a seat. Unconventional wisdom, dancing on your feet. Hey.
Hello and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom. I'm your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. I am here with Kerri Burns today. I can't wait for this conversation and for you to get to know her because she's going to have some wisdom for us today. I know that. And Kerri is the CEO of the Santa Barbara Humane Society. They have two campuses, one in Santa Barbara and one in Santa Maria. And it's a big organization with lots of different layers. They have medical, they have adoption, and they are also building a new campus in Santa Barbara. With that, welcome, Kerri.
Thank you, Ken. I love being with you. I love everything that you're doing, especially with the podcast and trying to get leaders to look at things and see what they can and can't do, and in conventional and unconventional ways, as you say.
And I would just say to the listener, I know Kerri fairly well. I know that she's just such an intentional leader. And that is one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on today, because she's thought through what it means to lead this organization. Nobody leads an organization without running up against challenges. And I think the way that she's tackled them has been really extraordinary. So I'm excited for you to hear all about that. Yeah.
How much time do you have? Right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Before we get there, we are dying to know, what is the most adventurous thing that you've done?
oh gosh, I have so many. You just have to be a part of my life to understand that. There's two, but I'll talk about the big one that's probably the most adventurous. A few years ago on my birthday, I woke up and said, gosh, what do I want to do for my birthday? And I decided to go out and just jump out of an airplane. So that was fun. But beside that, the most adventurous thing I think I've done, so I received a phone call from a friend of mine. And there's this big race that goes on every year, and all these sailboats go from Southern California to Hawaii. Now, mind you, the winds and the currents push you that way, so it's nice and easy. I got the call and said, hey, would you be part of the crew, because I sail, and bring the boat back from Hawaii to Southern California? And I said, sure. Wow. Note to self, I'll never do that again. It was one of those adventures where you have to pivot at every single moment. The weather got crazy. We almost ran out of fuel. We ran out of water at one point. We ran out of food. The mast decided to start tipping on us. One of the sails broke. We got a net caught. It was ridiculous. Everything, every day something happened. And just when you think you're going to have a great time and it's quote unquote smooth sailing, you learn your lessons, and you learn to just work together with your team and figure it out. And thank goodness we got home a week late, but we made it home. And I'm not sure that I've stepped on a sailboat since, actually, Kim. And I used to sail a lot. So it was interesting. The one moment during the entire craziness of it all, we even got stopped by the United States Navy at one point, and they told us that we had to divert our plan. We were so close to California because they were doing these drills, and we're like, we're out of food, we're out of water. We're like, please, this is a human health issue. And they're like, you must stay. And I was at the helm. So I did try to skirt across and not listen to them, and that didn't work. So we got stopped again. Nothing like feeling like you're in LA traffic, but you're in the ocean. It's just you and this big, huge naval ship in front of you telling you what to do. But the one little point in the middle of it that made me just breathe was we're in the middle of nowhere and there's literally nothing, no boats. I didn't see any whales or dolphins. And suddenly this one little bird just comes down and lands right on the railing. And I was like, oh, and sort of, what do I do? Of course, I'm like, I'm going to feed it. And he actually stayed with us for a day and a half before he flew off. He must have been tired and come off of some cargo ship, but I was like, you're okay, I'm okay, we're going to get through this. So made it back. But it was, if you want something some crazy adventure, yeah, come along with Kerri and something will typically happen.
Yeah. I love that. But I do think that it does, I think, and you said this, right? You can't get out of situations like that without teamwork, right? And it's interesting, right? Because in companies, we think, oh, if the team doesn't work out, I'll just go find another job, right? It may be painful, but you can
Mhm.
exit. You
Yeah,
are on a ship, right? Or a
there was
sailboat.
no exit.
There is no exit. Yeah. So,
There was, but that wasn't a choice I would have taken at that
yeah,
point. Yeah.
exactly. And I think what it means to be in a situation where we are going to work together and we're going to work this out. And I understand it is literally life and death, right? I've just been thinking a lot about sort of the stories that we bring with us about how we think things need to be because we have a preconceived notion of what that looks like when we are doing projects or we're leading teams, and how sometimes we can't believe everything we think, right?
True.
And that we often solve problems from the place of our understanding of what it is, and then we problem solve from there, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it was funny on the sailing adventure. It was like Gilligan's Island. The 3-day tour was a 3-week tour. The one expectation the captain had was that, oh, good, I'm glad she's on the boat because she'll cook. That
Oh
he and I
yeah.
did not get along. And because he learned that's no, you don't force someone in a role without finding out what their skills are. And I had
Right.
a lot of skills to offer at the time. And so he finally, after several days, he backed off on that and realized, and here we are stuck sleeping together and you all have to get along. And we did our best. But yeah, there were those expectations of this is your role and this is what you're doing. The answer is no, we all have to pivot and do whatever
Right.
we need to do at the moment and don't lock somebody into something.
Right. And I'm sure that there were a lot of gender expectations around
Absolutely.
it, which are really concerning. And good for
Yes.
you for not just saying, and you are not a person who is just going to say yes. That's not who you are. Yeah.
I used to be that person. I used to be that person early on in my career, right? If I say yes and I just do this, then things will get better. And I learned the lesson the hard way of no, I don't have to say yes to everything. And I need to respect myself, my boundaries, and let others know what my skills actually are.
Oh, such a great one. Listen, already gems. All right. Okay. So, my first question for you is, what's a piece of conventional business wisdom that you followed early on only to realize that it was not right for you, aside from cooking?
I do cook though, just so you know, I'm pretty
Yeah.
good. I can hand out apples on a sailboat. That's easy. I think early on, it was always ingrained the show up early and stay late. This is what you do. This is how you get ahead in life. You just show up early and stay late. And I realized I was wasting my energy because let's face it, Kim, even people that have 8-hour a day jobs don't work for 8 hours
Right.
consistently, right? I know when my brain times are and I get in and I can crank something out in a really short period of time. And then I need to renew my energy. So the be early, stay late philosophy did not work for me. And I really struggled with that. And then what I learned was, and even with my employees, it's really more about knowing your balance and communication. Of course, it's what you do, but it's more about how you communicate. I'm working on this project. Here's how I'm doing with it. I should be done by, or my expectations are, I want this project done. We're going to create a strategic plan, and here's the dates that we do it. I'm not telling you to come in at 6 in the morning when we normally start at 8 and you need to stay till 7 to get this done. Because if you're forcing something, I get it, there's deadlines, but sometimes when you force things to happen, you don't get your best product, right? And so I think that's important to understand. And my team, and I work for a nonprofit, obviously, and we're a local nonprofit. And my board and everybody knows that there's times that I'll just be in and I choose to work and get stuff done, whatever that looks like. But then there's days where I'm like, I need to refresh my energy because
Right.
I am, as much as I'm outward and I'm bold and I'm doing things, I am still an introvert living in an extrovert world. That's a new Madonna song, praise on that. But and I have to be very aware of that. So
Right.
the be early, stay late, I don't think that works anymore, not in our work world.
And I love what you said about really paying attention to your energy and when is a good time to do things. When do you need to be heads down? When do you need to take time to restore? And I think probably the biggest mistake, and maybe the thing that Gen Z really does have to teach us older professionals, is that we do need time for restoration,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think they're much more prone to take it. And what's so interesting is, like in my practice, I will so often hear criticism about, oh, the younger generation, like they don't want to work, and a lot of criticism. And I think there's really a lack of awareness of the difference in values. It's not that they don't want to work, they want flexibility in the work.
And that's not a bad thing.
That's right.
You have to, bottom line, you look at productivity, right? What are they doing? And retention.
That's right.
And that's where we need to work with now. And oh boy, if I would have done that a lot sooner, it would have maybe helped to stop some of this up and down with the
Right.
burnout. Oh, I can't
Exactly.
do this anymore. I hate what I'm doing. Oh, I love what I'm doing. You're just up against yourself.
Right. And I think we have some things to learn about, because I think the baby boomer and Gen Z, I think that what you're saying, that work ethic, like work hard because working hard equals success, and working hard meant working long hours, right? So
Right.
when millennials and Gen Zs came along and they were like, no, actually, I'm going to take my vacation time, right? And they were criticized. You're going to take all of your vacation? What are you
Yes.
talking about?
Yeah.
And on the one hand, on the other hand, my daughter told me the other day they're opening in the building that she's in charge of in downtown San Francisco, they're opening a conference room. So they have all kinds of events that go along with this grand opening. They're opening a gym and so forth. And the person who is in charge of that took last week off. And I was like,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
interesting timing.
Yeah. Yeah. It used to be save it up, bank it. If you take a day off, you're looked at poorly. And again, now I encourage all of my staff, you've got the time,
Yeah.
go.
Yeah.
Even if you just want to do a staycation, it doesn't matter. Get your head out from what you're currently doing
Yeah.
because you'll make space in your brain to come back and do more and maybe do it better.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know what? I just heard somebody talking about they're in a really high stress, another nonprofit dealing in a pretty high stress area. And I heard a discussion today actually about maybe some rotating, not forced time off, but everybody is feeling really burnt. And then the question is, are you really serving your population? Right? When you've got at your best capacity, right? And maybe that they need to do a rotating, like, time off so that there's coverage, right? But the org needs some new energy, right?
Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, lots of ways, right? We talk about like that in and of itself is unconventional and innovative, right? If you've got a staff that is pretty burnt out, how do you actually not force in a bad way, but how do you actually create a plan for the org where people basically need to take the time off, right?
Yes. But to that, so for example, this is where I have built an amazing team. And now I think about it, I'm not sure why I did this, but I went on a cruise. I just got back a couple weeks ago. My sister and I took our 85-year-old mother on for her birthday on this cruise. But the reason I felt really good was because I said, don't contact me.
What a
Not
novel
one
idea.
email, no, absolutely nothing. And I thought, you know what? I feel so confident in my leadership team that I better be able to step away knowing it will still run. I did that. I came back. Guess what? Everything was fine. So now, guess what? Right when I came back, my chief financial officer went on a very long vacation, and we said no one is to reach out to him or disturb him. We've got this. And guess what? Everything was fine. My chief veterinary officer is currently out of the country for 2.5 weeks. Guess what? We're going to be fine. And I think that's the thing is, oh my gosh, they can't function without me. I'll bet they can. I'll bet they can. And so I think that's very important that once you realize that and it's okay to step away, knowing that things are covered, then you're so much better off.
I agree 100%. All right. As a successful leader, what's one thing that people assume that you've got all figured out that inside you still wrestle with?
Wow. People just assume as a leader that you can handle any situation, right? You can just step in and it's Kerri, you come in my office, I've got this person up front, and I'm like, you've got this. But they just assume that you know everything, you can handle everything. And it's some days I have to almost pretend, yes, I've got this covered. And you just make it up as you go along. And I think I struggle with am I approaching this right? Am I doing it right? And I have to just take a moment because I think in too many businesses, we rush to do things as a leader. And for me, I know I'm like, okay, if you're asking me to step in and do something, tell me a little bit more about the situation. It gives me a moment to think, a moment to breathe, and a moment to be proactive in my approach, right? And ask more questions about things before you just go right into it. It's along the lines of, gosh, am I going to have to deal with a crisis today? Is this crisis management? How do I handle that? And you don't have to step up to the plate at that second, unless you're a firefighter and you're trying to put a fire out. That might be important. But for most of us, we can take a moment. And I think that's the thing that we don't do to say, how am I approaching this? What do I need to keep in mind? And for me, top of mind is our mission. Everything comes from there. I struggle with it though, because I'm so like, let's go, let's get this done. And I want to jump in and help and do immediately. And I don't need to. So I struggle with, I'm much better at it now, at just taking a moment. I don't have to jump feet first.
Right. And you said something really interesting too, to put the two things together. I was able to go away on this vacation, and other executives in my nonprofit, I was like company, I don't know, right? Nonprofit, organization. That's the word I was
There you
looking
go. That's
for.
what we're doing. Yeah.
Yeah. In your organization can go away because things are covered and people are empowered. I think bringing it into what you just said is the question of, is this even mine to solve? Because I
Yeah.
think that is a huge mistake that a lot of leaders make, which is if
Yeah.
you ask me the question, then it's my problem to solve, right? And
Mhm.
then you make yourself the middle of every decision. And then when you go on vacation, you
Yeah.
either are working or things break.
Right. Yeah, you brought up, which just reminded me. So we actually have for all of our staff empowerment cards. And if you can answer these 4 or 5 questions on your own, you just go, you do it. You don't need me. Maybe you don't need a manager. Maybe you don't need a supervisor. And so we have them at different levels. We take the 4 or 5 most important questions to ask yourself or think about that situation. And then you know what? You run with it. And if it gets to a point where you're like, oh, I'm stuck or I'm lost, or perhaps I should take this up, then it's fine. We want to empower. I want my staff and my leadership team to feel that they don't have to run to me, that they're professionals and they're growing into their own professional self. And that needs to start somewhere. And that's
Right.
why as small as that is, that little empowerment card gives them that kind of authority to be able to do that.
Oh my gosh, I love that because you're leading by example, but also giving people the tools because then the manager gets to say, did you answer those questions? Does this
Right.
really need to come to me? So it's working in all levels of the org, not
Yeah.
just at the top.
Yeah. And my
Yeah.
favorite question when people do come to me is, how would you handle this? Because I want to retire. I am not one of these leaders that I'm going to do this until I die. That's not
Mhm.
me. There's a life after this for me. And I think for some people, they just want to relax or take more time. But I need to start instilling the folks that work for me to think on their own, not have me or anyone else make all the decisions. And how would you handle that? And maybe they've enlightened the way that I should be handling something. So it's a coaching moment. And
Right.
they know if they're coming to me, have an answer ready. And I love that.
Yeah, I think you bring up such an interesting point of we typically sit in that leadership seat. People expect, and we maybe expect of ourselves that if somebody asks it, we have the answer or we will figure it out, right? And I
Yeah.
do think that idea, being open to the fact that maybe somebody can have a different or potentially even better solution than
Yeah.
I could think of myself
Mhm.
is extraordinary.
Yeah. But leaders need to be open to that.
Exactly.
It doesn't make you look weak. It actually makes you look stronger because you're respected and people look up to you. And so
Mhm.
when you're turning that back around, that's a put yourself in their place. That would feel good. Like
Yeah, and
CEO
even,
didn't ask.
yeah, what I was going to say is even yesterday, my one of my team members, and it was a minor thing, but he said, I think we should do it this way. And I was like, okay, here's my suggestion. But you know what? It's your project. So if you feel strongly about it, you do it your way. This is not a hill I need to die on, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think with my organization, and that's great thinking that way is so we've been around since 1887, right? And so when people are like, oh, I think I should do it, I'm like, you know what? If it's not against the mission, let's try it. What's going to happen? We've been around since 1887. If it doesn't work, we go back to doing it the way that we were doing it. And
right,
so it's that it's okay. And that's how growth happens. That's how new visions come to light. And I think that's for us how new programs get implemented to help our community as a whole, which is what
right.
I love.
I love that too. All right. If you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief that you'd throw away and what would you replace it with?
I think the concept that I'm the boss, right? And we're really talking about that. And I would reframe it or we just say that I'm a leader with a great team. And I think we need to get rid of that kind of the silo, the ego component of that, the one person, the El Jefe in there. It's not being a boss. It really is that educational component of being a leader. By the time that you get to a position like I'm in, it's not just about oversight, it's about visionary, but it's also about being a mentor to others. And I think when you get here, you've gained so much skill, which is what I love what you're doing with your podcast is you're allowing others to talk about it and learn that. But we need to be mentors. And so I think the old concept of a boss, because people will come in there and they're like, hey, boss. And I'm like, it's yes, but no. And really take ego out of the work that we do is really important. I think that's something that is just old school. If you don't work with a team, you're not going to get far, really not. And I think
Right,
that's a whole label and kind of a just an old school way of really leading is considering yourself just the boss.
right.
Too outdated.
Yeah. Good. So, what's one unconventional habit or mindset shift that's helped you grow in this role that you're in and help the org grow?
I have done so much. You know my story. I've just done so many things in my work and stuff. But for me, I still get out there with my staff. I still get out there and I talk to clients. As a nonprofit, I need to be connected. And for us, we've created an entire what we call culture of caring. And it's caring about each other, it's caring about volunteers, it's caring about our clients, it's caring about the animals. And it's really a culture that you create. But for me, I get out there and my staff knows that because we work with animals, if I need to help them scoop poop for a day, I'm going to do it. If I were to remove myself and not be out there with the staff and not be out there with the volunteers, how can I tell the story? Because I'm a storyteller about who we are and what we do as an organization. How can I really be passionate about our mission if I'm not there doing and understanding what they do every day? So for me, it's important. And I think everyone needs to do that.
Yeah. Okay. So, two things. One, listener, I do want to tell you that before we started recording, Kerri said to me, I have to apologize in advance if you hear snoring on the audio because she's got a foster dog in her office right now, and she's always got animals in her office. And so we are not hearing snoring, but thank you for the warning.
Okay, because he is snoring.
Oh, how funny. And then the second thing that I do want to bring in here, because you, this is a pretty big nonprofit, right? It's got a pretty big budget. You got to handle a lot. There's the business of running a humane society, right? But I think the other thing that I want to bring in here about an unconventional mindset shift, just because I happen to know you and I know that this happened, which is that you needed to launch and successfully fund a capital campaign, right?
Yeah.
And when we first talked about it, you were like, Kim, I've never done this before. And you had a board that had never fundraised any significant amount of money. And you had to raise tens of millions of dollars in order to do this. So tell us a little bit about what that personal journey for you was, taking on something that was so daunting and just something that you had never done before.
Let me back up and I'll take you through the quick journey of when I started here. Now, I've been in this industry for 27 years, right? So go in and help organizations. I've done disaster response for 10 years. Anyways, I get here. This is 8 years ago, Kim, and you know the story, but everything this organization did was on 3x5 index cards. We didn't have any software programs. We didn't have anything. We had 3 different email addresses. We didn't have any type of donor database. Now, remember earlier I said we've been around since 1887. So, hello. So my first year was, we didn't have standard operating procedures. We didn't have shirts. We had absolutely nothing. So I had a blank slate to go. Here we go. It can't get worse. It can't. And so we started developing infrastructure. We had job descriptions. We had roles and responsibilities. We had uniforms. We had a website. We started building a donor base. Year 2, because this is how I work, I tried merging 6 nonprofits in this small little county. And because I'm one of those, just go big or go home, because from that, you'll glean something. And with that, we ended up merging with another humane organization. And now we partner very closely with the other ones that were at the table. Year 3 was COVID. Nobody had a book for that one, right? What do we do? How do we get out of this? And then year 4 was COVID. And from that, then we had a lot that I just sat back and I looked and I said, we've got to start redefining who we are, what we do, and really build for the community and the pets, right? So we just built this strategic plan and said, we're going to build a state-of-the-art facility. We are wiping every single building down. Had to get my board. My first board that I started with, they ended up not sticking around because they realized that they couldn't do what I needed them to do. And I had to rebuild an entire board. And I've been training the board, and the board's doing great, and we're all on the same page. But I said, listen, if we don't do this now, when is it going to happen? And so we took on doing a complete capital campaign. And that means taking our 4 acres and going from a few buildings that were built in the 1960s to a state-of-the-art facility that will house not only an amazing, we're calling it a campus, not a shelter. We want people to come learn. We're going to have an amazing medical facility. We're actually a training hospital for vet students now. When I started here, we were doing about 10 adoptions a month. Last year, we did 2,223. We were doing around 5 surgeries a day, just spays and neuters. Last year alone, we saw 43,000 patients through here. because if I now have 9 full-time veterinarians, we're a training hospital, we do more than spay neuter. So we said, what can we do and what does the community need? Every day, that's what I ask. And we're like, people are turning in their animals because we don't have enough dog training programs. Let's create one. People need access to veterinary care. They can't afford dentals. Let's do them. So again, if it wasn't against the mission and it wasn't anything that we haven't tried, let's try it. And our trajectory, my chief financial officer said, if we look at our financials, and I started with 10 staff, I now have 78. If we looked at our organization, just like any NASDAQ or any company listed, we would be like Amazon because of where we started and where we're going. And it's about vision. It's about just having a strategic plan, which is what you're really good at helping with too. And it's about communicating with your team that we can do this and you are part of this and you're going to get us there, and telling the story to the community. We want to be there for you. We want to help you. What do you need? You tell us. And when we hear those things, then we have created this entire campus of a new vision of what animal welfare looks like in the future. Not the sad dogs behind the cages and people singing, but something completely different. If we don't start changing things and keep doing it the same way we kept doing it, or the same way our neighbors are doing it, then we're not going to make a difference in really our world of nonprofit. And so we're going by leaps and bounds, but those leaps and bounds, we've had very few setbacks. And when we do, we talk about it and say, which direction do we go from here? And it's been an amazing journey, just amazing.
Yeah. I want to just say a couple of things. The way that you describe it, yeah, there are not, you've been very lucky in terms of haven't been a lot of major setbacks, but I just want to say that just what it takes for you to go from a place of, once I have a vision, I don't have the support that I need to make this vision become a reality, to having already broken ground on the first building, right?
Yes, we have.
It is really extraordinary that you have been able to, again, not just have a vision, but really make it come to fruition, right? The first building's already being built,
Yep, it
right?
is. Yeah.
How amazing. All right. I have one last question for you. And then I understand that our listeners are all over the world. What I do want to say is that if you're interested in what Santa Barbara Humane is doing, that again, there is no donation too small or too large. And that they would welcome, if you care about animal welfare and you want to support the cause, we'll put a donation link in the show notes. And I would really encourage you to support this incredible vision and the animals. Right at the end of the day, it is really about the animals. And I think for me too, I think the idea that we're also training humans to be better stewards of the animals in which they care for. It's funny when my husband and I got our first dog, and you know what I used to say about the dog was, we didn't just make mistakes in training the dog, we invented mistakes. It, oh,
Yes.
but he was so cute and so snuggly, right?
Uh-huh.
Isn't that all it
Yeah.
takes? Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, not
Exactly.
so much. Yeah.
No, yeah, that will come back to bite you in the long run. So
Yeah. Yeah, I got the scar to prove it.
yeah,
Yeah.
see, yeah, that's
Yeah.
how it goes.
Yeah. You
Love it.
mean that dog is not just going to, you mean if I go and take a chicken bone out of its mouth, it's not going to just give it to me?
Why don't dogs automatically know how to sit? I don't understand.
All right. One last question for you. So many leaders battle with imposter syndrome, that moment of lack of confidence or kind of that intake of breath. In the current iteration of Kerri, if that's going to come up for you, what circumstance is that going to get you? And then how do you get yourself back moving forward?
The imposter syndrome thing, which is relatively new term, had no idea what it was early on, was definitely, I had that early on. I think because I've become so much more confident in my leadership and I just am who I am, there are times I feel like, oh, I have to go to this meeting or I have to fit in. And that's when it pops up, like I have to be something. And I
Right.
remind myself that I don't.
Yeah.
People, they're going to like me or not like me. I cannot and will not force that. I just am who I am now with
Yeah.
whatever I do. And I think it brings a level of trust with people, with me, and authenticity, that they realize that where I'm coming from. I don't, if there's a situation where I'm talking to somebody and they're like, "Well, you should," or this should happen. I'm like, no. And you know what? Maybe we're not the organization that you should be talking to. Maybe this is it. And it's okay to say this just isn't a great fit here.
Right.
Appreciate you. But I don't need to be anyone other than I am.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know who I am. I'm comfortable. I'm confident. If I don't have an answer for something and someone's expecting that, it's okay. I don't have to have everything. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get with my team. I'm going to get right back to you on that because honestly, I don't know. And that's okay. Knowing that I can say, I don't know, knowing that I can say no, and it's okay, are two of the probably biggest lessons that I've really learned. And just, I love what I do. I think my passion shows. If anyone's near the Santa Barbara, California area, come do a tour with us. My entire team runs at about the same energy and same passion that I do. And we just love it. But you don't have to be anything other than who you are. Know your stuff, know when to say no, and just know when to say, I'll get back to you. And I think
Right.
that's so important because there's expectations of that imposter syndrome of, I have to be this executive and I have to know everything. And sometimes in the past, come on, let's admit it. There's times you feel like you can just make up something and it's going to be okay when that's not the time to do it.
Yeah. I think it takes a lot of confidence actually to be able to say, I don't know.
That to me is a strong leader. When someone can
Right.
say that to me and I'm like, I respect you for that.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. I would say if I'm being fully transparent for me, like I agree with you 100%. I think I'm very aware of my very high need to be liked, right? It's really interesting because we haven't know each other, right? I can be very judgy, right? I can be like, I like you, I don't like you, right?
Yeah. Right.
But I want everybody to like me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I get to not like you, but you have to like me, right? And I will also say at times, hey, listen, same as what you just said. Listen, we both have really strong personalities. I am who I am. I'm not the right person for everybody. I'm not a lot of people's cup of tea, and that's okay, right?
Yeah.
But show me you don't like me, and it's like stabbing me in the heart, right? So
Yeah.
I think a lot of times we have a lot of these conflicting things that
Absolutely.
go on all at the same time.
Absolutely. And there was in my earlier years, I think that's why I said yes so much, is because I wanted everyone to like me. And
Right.
now I'm like, not so much.
Yeah.
And for example, I work with a lot of different donors, right? And there's one that I just gets my blood pressure up, but maybe a little bit of the imposter syndrome. You just go, oh, yes. But that's when I'm always like, you've got these great questions and you always bring up stuff. Instead of meeting with me, I think you should be meeting with, and my staff's happy to step up because we're like, oh, we love those kind of challenges. But you're really good at understanding and helping people define what their personalities are and how to work around and with those personalities. And my team, we worked with you with this and it was fantastic. But that's what we do. We can
Right.
also bounce that off of each other
That's right.
because we're all going to run into people in our lives where we're
Mhm.
like, For me, my brain's doing this cartoon thing of, and you just have to look at them and smile. And it's like,
Yeah, and I do. I think you bring up a really interesting point too. Again, I think for me, this feels like a little bit of a full circle moment. And I'm not talking specifically about that situation, but sometimes when I run into situations where I find somebody irritating, which is not what you said, I'm just putting it in a different context.
oh, there
Sometimes
are those out there. There's a lot of irritating people out there.
there are a lot of
let's just be
irritating
honest.
people. But I think
Yes.
sometimes I I really want to ask myself, what is my story about that? Or what I think is really interesting is that when somebody just shows up as they are, right? And they've got that trait with everybody, and yet you take it incredibly personally, right? They're doing this to me. I always think that's an interesting thing to look at, right? No, they're just doing themselves, right? You can choose to be like, okay, you're being you. I'm not so into that, right? I choose not to deal with you. But I do think especially in work situations where you have repeated interactions with people who you tend to clash with. I do think it's really interesting to look at what's your story about that, right? If they're showing up the same for everybody,
Sure.
why is it so objectionable to you?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I always remember I don't need to get into their space and energy. I can stay in mine.
that's right.
And that's extremely, I think, extremely hard for people to do. Right?
Yes.
You start pushing my buttons, I would have pushed back, right? And we don't need to do that. If they're going to be like, let them be that way, and you don't have to say anything, you don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
Just know your space. And I think that's very difficult. Sometimes silence is the best thing you can do in a conversation.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Kerri, I love that. That is such a good thought to end with. So wise. So you have been listening to Unconventional Wisdom about conventional wisdom. You have gotten a lot of wisdom today. So we delivered on our promise. Yeah. So again, Kim Miller-Hershon, your host, Kerri Burns, CEO of Santa Barbara Humane. Donation link in the chat if you are so moved. And we appreciate you listening. For me, I would love for you to subscribe to my newsletter. We put it out once a week. It just has one thing on it. We've gotten some good feedback on it. So give it a try and go out there and be a better human.
Where cliches come to